The race for the White House in November is now official. It will be Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump. The two candidates represent two different political parties.
That's right. The Democrats have approved their most liberal platform ever. Jennifer Wishon brings us this look at Clinton's official nomination and how the Republican and Democratic platforms stand on key issues like taxpayer-funded abortion and Israel.
In the same city where the framers met to craft the Constitution, Democrats made history as the first major party to nominate a woman for president.
If there are any little girls out there who stayed up late to watch, let me just say, I may become the first woman president, but one of you is next. Thank you all. I can't wait to join you in Philadelphia. Thank you.
It was Clinton's fierce primary rival, Bernie Sanders, who put her over the top, pulling a procedural move that allowed him to give her his delegates.
I move that Hillary Clinton be selected as the nominee of the Democratic Party for President of the United States.
It was an emotional day as Clinton supporters anticipated the historic moment, and Sanders supporters faced reality. Sanders' brother Larry breaking down as he cast his vote.
It is with enormous pride that I cast my vote for Bernie Sanders.
Former President Bill Clinton took Democrats through his life with Hillary, telling stories about her as a wife and mother, while reminding them of her credentials.
I can tell you this. If you were sitting where I'm sitting, and you heard what I have heard at every dinner conversation, every lunch conversation, on every long walk, you would say, this woman has never been satisfied with the status quo in anything. She always wants to move the ball forward. That is just who she is.
They have a nominee. Now Clinton supporters hope to use the party planks to bring the Sanders faithful back into the fold.
Even though it doesn't go far enough for Bernie Sanders supporters, Democrats passed their most liberal platform in history here in Philadelphia. It stands in stark contrast to the one passed by Republicans in Cleveland last week. Here's what you need to know about the values of America's two political parties. Of two paths for America's future, two political platforms.
It really kind of gives a roadmap for the party's principles.
On nearly every issue, there's a distinction between the Democrat and Republican parties.
We produce by far the most progressive platform in the history of the Democratic Party.
On abortion, Democrats turned their backs on 40 years of policy. They call for the repeal of the Hyde Amendment, a law signed by President Carter that prohibits the use of federal tax dollars for abortion. It's a move that alienates 1 in 3 Democrats, according to Democrats for Life. Michael Ware, a former faith advisor to President Obama, calls the move disappointing and misguided.
I think the decision the party has to make is whether we're going to continue to be an open tent, welcoming the people who disagree on such a core moral issue as the sanctity of life, or whether we're going to become a more strident, closed off, frankly less inclusive party.
On other social issues, the differences in the platforms are vast.
There's things in that platform that have never been written in there in the history of the party.
Republicans call traditional marriage the foundation for a free society and acknowledge traditional families as ideal for raising healthy kids who are less likely to get in trouble. The Democratic platform calls for expanding rights for LGBT Americans. On the environment, Democrats call for a carbon tax. Republicans oppose it.
One of the things that we thought was really amazing, even though we're here as Hillary Clinton delegates, how proud we were that you could hear and see Bernie's voice in that platform to be the most progressive platform in our lifetime that the Democratic Party has ever passed.
Bernie backers represent a growing gap between Democrats and Republicans on Israel. Even though the platforms include similar language, both parties oppose efforts to delegitimize Israel through the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Republicans take it further, calling the BDS movement anti-Semitic and call for legislation to stop actions that limit commercial relations with Israel. During the drafting of the Democrats' platform, debate about Israel caused so much passion, police had to wade into the audience as activists shouted down delegates. Bernie Sanders backed a measure to end the occupation of Palestinians. Liberal activists also called for the rebuilding of the Gaza Strip.
It is apparently the most progressive platform we've ever had.
Keyes, a Bernie supporter, says this is only the beginning. They're leaving Philly to focus on electing the most liberal candidates they can to every office, from dog catcher to president. In this election, more than ever, Americans have a clear choice between two very different visions. It's also a time when Christians have a chance to make a major impact.
There's an anxiety in our culture. It should be the Christian voice that is not echoing the despair, but offering a voice of possibility and love and a future in Christ and a security in Christ.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News at the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia.
Well, regardless of your views on the platforms, the various positions, we have to congratulate Hillary Clinton for being the first woman to ever be nominated by a major party for president of the United States. Congratulations to her. It's quite an achievement. Well, we have some other news, and these stories are likely to frame this election cycle. ISIS has carried out yet another deadly attack today, killing 44 people in Syria. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. 2 bombs struck a crowd in a predominantly Kurdish town in northern Syria today, wounding dozens of people in addition to the nearly 50 who were killed. Media reports said a truck with a large amount of explosives blew up, followed by a bombing from a motorcycle packed with explosives a few minutes later in the same area. ISIS has claimed responsibility for the attack. The blast caused massive damage, and rescue teams were working to recover victims from under the rubble. Well, a deadly milestone in the war ISIS is waging on the West, the brutal murder of a French priest in the middle of a worship service. ISIS has urged its followers to attack French churches, and this latest terrorist assault is being called an attack on Christianity. Heather Sells has the story.
The Islamic State has crossed a new threshold in its war against the West. Tuesday morning, 2 of its followers entered a Catholic church in Normandy during Mass. They slit the throat of an elderly priest and took hostages to use as human shields. One nun narrowly escaped. He forced them to get on their knees, and they tried to defend themselves. The Reverend Jacques Hamel, an 85-year-old priest celebrating the Mass for 3 nuns and 2 parishioners, was killed. 1 parishioner was wounded. Witnesses say the attackers did a sort of sermon around the altar in Arabic. Police later shot and killed them as they rushed from the building yelling Allahu Akbar. Outside the priest's home, townspeople are remembering him. This couple said Reverend Hamel had just baptized their baby on Saturday and that they collapsed when they heard the news. Shortly after the attack, ISIS claimed responsibility. Authorities say one of the assailants was 19-year-old Adel Kermish, who grew up in the town and tried to travel to Syria twice last year. He was under house arrest on preliminary terrorism charges. The attack marks the first time that ISIS has targeted a church in the West, and world leaders have quickly condemned it.
You know, this was really a barbaric killing, and unfortunately it took place in a sacred place.
France and the United States share a commitment to protecting religious liberty for those of all faiths, and today's violence will not shake that commitment.
In Britain, police say jihadists could target them next. They've increased security at the country's 47,000 churches. Some analysts say the attack in France was a shot directly at Christianity in the modern Western world, and it may not be the last. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Thanks, Heather. Gordon, apparently lows that know no bounds.
Well, there's a specific target here, and that is Christianity. You look at what's happening in Iraq and Syria, where ancient Christian communities are literally being wiped out. Now you take it into France and an attack directly in a church where you slit the throat of a priest on his knees, and then you deliver an Arabic sermon in the middle of a church. Now go back in history and what happened The Muslims invaded Europe. It's around 700, a whole century of it, until Charlemagne finally put an end to all of that. And you see just the same level of violence. Look at history. Look at the sack of Burgundy, when they went in and beheaded people in the streets. Look at the Battle of Tours, where their goal was they wanted to conquer the cathedral in Tours and set up a mosque there. By doing this kind of act and then declaring a sermon in Arabic, they were symbolically claiming that church for Islam. That's the purpose behind it. That's what this was all about. And we need to learn from our history. Where did the title Defender of the Faith come from? It wasn't something about heresies. It was about Islam. The rulers of Europe were called the Defender of the Faith because they were defending against the incursions of what Muslims were doing. Are we going back to that? I kind of doubt it. I don't think any ruler in Europe wants to take that title anymore. We don't want to call ourselves Christendom anymore. But that is the war we're in. It's a war of ideologies. It's a war of religion. They are intentionally targeting our churches. They're intentionally targeting Christian communities in the Middle East and now in Europe. And we need to face it for what it is and quit trying to cover it up or say it's not radical Islam, it's something else. These are all deranged people. Very wrong view. We've got to recognize what happened here. Why did they deliver a sermon in Arabic in the middle of a Catholic church while a priest is bleeding out on their in the feet before him? It's a horrific act. But what they were doing is saying, we're claiming this church for Islam. Wendy?
Gordon, France is such a country so close to our hearts. So many of us have traveled there. I actually did a semester in Normandy when I was in college. And, you know, it breaks our heart, but every time this happens, the French president says, he comes out and he talks really tough. Do you think France will be able to do anything to protect their people?
Well, I think all civilized, democratic societies need to band together and specifically go after ISIS and specifically target it. This isn't something you contain. This is something that we need to eradicate.
They need our help. I mean, let's face it. All right, thanks, Gordon.